just ruled that individual judges lack the authority to grant nationwide injunctions. The 6-3 decision marks a victory for President Trump after numerous federal judges issued rulings blocking his agenda. However, the court's decision didn't extend to the issue of birthright citizenship. The majority left open the possibility that changes could remain blocked nationwide. Trump's order would deny citizenship to illegal parents with children born in the U.S. Birthright citizenship was enshrined soon after the Civil War in the Constitution's 14th Amendment. The Trump administration has argued that children of non-citizens are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and therefore are not entitled to citizenship. Attorney General Pam Bondi and Vice President J.D. Vance hailed the decision. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court issued a series of other rulings. The High Court today sided with a group of parents challenging mandatory LGBT books in school curriculum. Former President Barack Obama's landmark healthcare legislation got backing from the justices as well. The court upheld the authority of an Affordable Care Act task force that recommends preventative health care services that insurers must cover. In another case, the justices affirmed a series of programs that reduce broadband internet and telephone services prices for low-income and rural communities. President Trump held a press conference right after the Supreme Court's rulings in which he hailed the High Court's decisions. NTD's Iris Tao joins us now live from the White House. Good afternoon, Iris. You asked President Trump a very good question. Can you tell us more about it?
Good afternoon to you as well, Dawn. So the Supreme Court today delivered President Trump a major win by curbing the power of lower courts to issue injunctions against his executive actions. It's a 6-3 decision along ideological lines issued by the court. It was written by Justice Amy Barrett today. And also Trump today telling NTD at a press conference this morning that this decision by the Supreme Court today really gave the power back to the American people, Congress, as well as the presidency. Watch.
Iris Tao with NTD Research Media with the Epoch Times. Thank you so much for doing this. It's very refreshing for all of us here in this room.
It's refreshing.
Very refreshing. Yes, we have to have this, and
I understand what you mean.
So thank you so much for coming out here.
Other than Caroline's done a great job.
Yes.
You're referring to the past administration, not to Caroline, right?
Yes. Back to the ruling today, if you don't mind. So you have always talked about winning for the American people.
Right.
How do you think today's ruling will enable you to further deliver for American families and workers across the country, not only when it comes to immigration, but also when it comes to trade, energy? What actions are most eager to move forward?
Well, I think taking power away from these absolutely crazy radical left judges is a tremendous. This is such a big day. This is such a big day. It's like. It's sort of sad because we're doing the signing at 3 o'clock, and this may very well dominate the signing of a big war that was going on and really affecting the continent of, think of it, the entire continent of Africa was being affected. And we're settling that war today, and this will probably be a headline. But this is a very big moment, and it gives power back to people that should have it, including Congress, including the presidency.
And specifically, what the ruling today means is that going forward, the practice of automatically granting U.S. citizenship to illegal immigrants in this country will end in the 28 states that did not challenge Trump's order. And also goes beyond just that. President Trump says now with this latest ruling, the administration can properly file to proceed in other policies beyond just the birthright citizenship order that was blocked by nationwide injunctions. And since day one, President Trump has been hit with numerous injunctions for his executive orders, and actually Trump said today that he's been hit with more injunctions than all of 20th century combined. Attorney General Pam Bondi today was also at the press conference, of course celebrating the Supreme Court's decision and also criticizing lower courts judges nationwide, saying that they're acting like emperors. Here's what she said. Watch.
94 districts and 35 out of the 40 opinions with nationwide injunctions came from 5 liberal districts in this country. No longer will we have rogue judges striking down President Trump's policies across the entire nation.
And later this afternoon, President Trump will host the foreign ministers of Rwanda as well as Congo here at the White House. And that is part of the efforts to take credit and celebrate a peace deal between the two countries facilitated by the U.S. administration. Back to you.
And Iris, President Trump was also asked about the recent strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Tell us more about that and what he said.
Sure. So President Trump said he doubled down that the nuclear sites in Iran that were struck by U.S. forces were completely obliterated. He added that it's true that nothing was removed from Iran's nuclear sites before the strike, and adding that he does not believe that there were secret sites that Iran was using to hide their enriched uranium. Here's what Trump said about the U.S. strikes. Watch.
Think of this dark, no moon, you couldn't see a thing, and they hit the refrigerator door, as they say. That's the size of a target, and overwhelmingly, and it's amazing what was done. We're the only ones that could have done it. And we took out the two of the other sites also. In addition to that, we finished them off.
Of course, it comes as the administration is refuting reports by outlets like CNN and the New York Times, which they call fake, reporting that there's a leaked intel report from the U.S. government suggesting that the sites were not completely destroyed and the impact on Iran's nuclear capabilities are limited. Trump has been pushing back on those and claims saying that the report was preliminary, incomplete, and that the White House says that it was people inside the government who disliked Trump that intentionally pushed out such narratives to media outlets who later use them to push out, again, incomplete narratives. Back to you, Don.
Okay, Iris, thank you. And the Supreme Court partially allowed Trump's birthright citizenship order to move forward in a 6-3 decision. The justices ruled that federal courts can't block a law or policy for the whole country. And joining us now to discuss this is Bobby Ann Cox, civil rights attorney and fellow, Brownstone Institute and legal analyst. So Bobby, good afternoon, Bobby Ann. Can you explain for us what the Supreme Court actually decided in this case and what did it not decide?
Yes, absolutely. So today's decision by the United States Supreme Court did not decide the underlying issue. What I mean by that is they did not rule on whether or not Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship in our country is legal or not. That is not what they answered. The question they answered today was whether or not the lower court judges, so the judges that sit at the federal trial courts and the federal appellate courts, whether or not they have the power to make an injunction that blankets the entire country. And what they said in this ruling today was that no, those judges in those lower federal courts don't have the power to issue an injunction on something that the president has done or wants to do across the entire nation. They only have jurisdiction to do that for whoever is involved in the case at hand. So that's a pretty big ruling today because it will affect other issues, not just the birthright citizenship executive order.
Okay, can you go into a bit deeper into what you just said now? What are the impacts and what does today's ruling mean for children born of parents unlawfully present in the U.S.?
Right. So what the court has said today is that in most states now, what's going to happen is Trump's executive order will take effect. I believe they said it'll take effect in about 30 days from now. So that means that in most of the states in our country, if a child is born and they are born to parents that are here either temporarily or they are here illegally, then that child does not automatically become a citizen of our country. So they are upholding Trump's executive order, which he had issued back in January of this year. And they're saying that for the majority of the country, that is going to be in effect. What would be not in effect, it would just be the exact people, the exact plaintiffs that sued in this case right now. So judges are being ruled, they're being curtailed in their rulings because what they've been doing, what we've been seeing, particularly in 2025, is federal judges that are at the lower court level, right? They're trial court judges, they're intermediate appellate court judges. They are not justices of the Supreme Court. And they've been issuing decisions and saying, this applies to the entire country. but that's not a power that the Constitution gives them. And that's what today's ruling is saying.
Okay, on that point, Bobby Ann, that judges are being curtailed, does this limit the power of lower federal courts? Does it tilt the balance of power toward the executive branch more?
Well, it's not that it tilts the balance of power. And actually, a really good quote would be to look at what Amy Coney Barrett wrote in the decision, because she wrote the decision for the majority in this case today. And she, in essence, said, you know, if the executive branch, meaning the president and his agencies, if the executive branch is overstepping and a lower court, a lower federal court, whether it's the trial court or the appellate court, finds that the executive branch is overstepping, it doesn't mean that the court can then overstep its authority and make a decision and do a blanket nationwide injunction, because the lower courts don't have that power. So what she's effectively saying here, and she's writing for the majority, so what the majority is saying here is that if a lower court finds that the executive branch is overreaching and going beyond their constitutional powers, it does not mean that the court can then overreach and go beyond its constitutional powers in trying to curb the president on a nationwide level. So they really are solidifying the power of the Supreme Court. That's a job the Supreme Court can do. That's their power. It's not a power that these lower court judges have.
Okay, so that's the majority opinion. Let's also talk about the dissenting opinion. Justice Sotomayor wrote that the court has disregarded, quote, basic principles of equity as well as the long history of injunctive relief granted to non-parties. Going forward, will non-parties, those not directly involved in the case, that is, have any chance of relief in future cases? Can you just comment on that?
Right. So what the dissenting justices are saying in this part here is that they feel that if a lower court federal judge is not allowed to do a blanket nationwide injunction on something to stop the executive branch, to stop something President Trump is trying to do, she's saying if they're not allowed to do that, then there are other people in other states and around the country that will be subjected to whatever the executive order or the action of the power of the president is. And that's true. If we take away the power of these lower federal judges to do a blanket nationwide injunction and stop the president's orders or policies from going into effect, yes, that means that in those states where it's not taking effect because they're not part of the plaintiff pool, then in that case, those people will be, in essence, having to fight their own fight and bring their own lawsuits. So she is correct in that, but she's overlooking the fact that these lower federal courts don't have the power to do that. That is not what Article 3 of our Constitution says.
Okay, there were other decisions as well today, and I do want to get to those as well. I'll just ask you one more question on this ruling. You mentioned earlier the court didn't rule on the constitutionality of Trump's birthright citizenship order itself, but it is willing to partially lift the injunctions, right? Are there any signals to be read there?
Well, it's not really a signal, but if you read the decision, the dissenting opinion, the dissenting justices, the three liberal justices on the court did say they thought the underlying issue that Trump's executive order that says we are ending this birthright citizenship for people that are here temporarily or here illegally, they did say they found that, or they thought that, to be unconstitutional and that it conflicts with the Constitution. But the majority did not rule on that. So that issue is not decided today. And perhaps that will be decided when the court resumes in October of this year. But they do have summer break coming up. So I don't see that issue being ruled upon before the summer break begins.
All right, let's also talk about the Supreme Court also ruling that Maryland parents who have religious objections can pull their children from public school lessons that are using LGBTQ storybooks. Walk us through that decision.
Yeah, so this is a very important decision. The Supreme Court today issued a ruling that basically solidifies not just the First Amendment rights to freedom of religion, but also parents' rights. Something that we've seen that's really been under attack these last few years in our country. So what they said in this ruling was that the school district in Maryland, which was integrating into the school system and the teachings of the children LGBTQ books, transgender books, without giving the parents the option to pull their kids from those classes and not have their children learn about it, that is unconstitutional, that you can't do that because that would be the government forcing citizens to learn things that go against their religion. And you can't do that as a government entity. So they said this is unconstitutional, meaning if the school district wants to do this and have this part of their curriculum, they do have to afford an opt-out provision for the parents that don't want their children to learn these things, particularly at that age or that point in their schooling development. So it's a very important ruling. And as it stands now, what this means is those parents will be given or must be given an opt-out if that rule or that policy or that law is going to stay in effect in Maryland. But this is going to affect other states as well. This is not just going to be something that affects this particular Maryland school district. So we are going to see now the ripple effect with other states, including New York, where they do push these things and these policies are in place right now, will be affected by this decision today.
Yeah, a lot of important decisions coming out today. And if I may, let me just get one quick comment, one more from you. The U.S. Supreme Court also decided to uphold a Texas law requiring age verification to access pornographic websites. What did exactly the Supreme Court uphold in the law, and what was their reasoning?
Right. So with this law, it's a Texas state law which says that if a website has, I believe it's more than 30% of its content that is pornographic, that they must make a process that the person going on their website to view their website and its content has to prove their age. So that would be, age verification through a license or some sort of government photo ID or something like this. And if they didn't do that, if the website didn't require that the people coming onto their website, the users, prove their age, then the consequences could be dramatic. I believe it was up to $250,000 as a fine if they did catch somebody allowing a minor to go on their website, and if it was more than 30% pornographic material. So this is a pretty bold decision by the United States Supreme Court because they are upholding this law and saying it's okay for Texas to say this.
Well, really appreciate your time today, Bobby Yan. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Coming up, Beijing will approve exports of controlled items to the U.S. In response, the U.S. will lift a series